With that said, how can you position Huntress? In other words, how does it fit into your security stack? You can imagine we get asked this question a lot. It's typically, the first question that comes out when we get into discovery with folks on calls. There are many different ways, frameworks, attack timelines to show where Huntress fits in your stack. And don't worry, we will cover that a little bit here. But let us know if there's ones we've missed. I like to say you've got locks on your doors and at your house and your windows. Huntress is essentially going to be that alarm system alerting you of the scarier things that are making it through. Covering a gap that is past your preventatives and before your backups is ultimately the goal there. But that's kind of the high level. So to get a bit more formal, the NIST cybersecurity framework allows us to take cybersecurity down to the next level, establishing actions and structure around cybersecurity. So first up is to identify. It's critical, and one of the most important things to us, you need to have these critical IT assets that you need to protect. Is there any prioritization or criticality around each asset? For example, are services more important than end user devices? This has to be first. You have to know what you want to protect. And second up is protect. We have to put in safeguards to minimize the likelihood and or impact of a cybersecurity incident. And on to detect, if and when an incident does occur, we want to be in a position where we can detect that incident quickly and be prepared for the next phase. Moving on to respond, this is us preparing so we can respond quickly to a potential incident and minimize any potential impact. And then lastly, by recovering, this is how we can get back to a normal state, bring everything back online and back to work so we can continue focusing on the needs of the business. This is kind of a follow-up from the previous slide, and it allows us to unroll the NIST framework and map to the solutions in your stack. So when we think of each of these phases in the cybersecurity framework, each security solution has its role to play, which is why we emphasize a security stack. And Huntress has historically operated specifically on what Kyle, our CEO, often calls the right of boom. Once something hits, how do you respond and recover? And stay tuned, and we'll go into details a little bit more on that as well. So think about it this way. For a long time, our cybersecurity focused on preventive measures. Think about entry into a large event, such as a sports arena. There are turnstiles where staff scan your ticket to let you into the building. Imagine you were trying to get in without a legitimate ticket. You would be stopped before you even get inside. So if you were a bad actor, you would invest in ways to make your tickets look more legitimate, right? We use tools like firewall and antivirus to scan the legitimacy of data before it enters your IT system in an effort to stop the bad actors before they gain that access. Attackers respond to these preventive measures and are finding unique ways to still get through. So, we got to look at a couple different things here. With detection and response, they go hand in hand. Apologies, and go back a little bit here. So, that's with the protection and response, and those preventive measures are finding unique ways to get through still. And then as we move on, we also do have the detection and response, and they go hand in hand with the prevention. So back to that sports arena analogy there, let's say the bad actor was able to present a convincing enough ticket to get past the staff at the door. So once inside, there would be security guards scanning the space, watching for suspicious activity. A really smart bad actor would find a way to hide in plain sight by imitating that security guard. So once they have a uniform and a badge, how do we determine that they are not a legitimate guard? We're applying this methodology to our security. We found that attackers are constantly finding ways around preventive measures, and we need to have a way to root them out. If we can continue scanning your computer network, looking for suspicious behaviors, such as a file that is named correctly, but maybe acting inappropriately, we can monitor and decide if we need to respond before they are able to execute on their malicious plan. So response involves finding a way to return your systems to normal. This could be as simple as kicking out the attacker by removing malicious software and then looking for any additional bad actors or actions involved. Or if the bad actor has been able to execute their malicious actions, such as installing ransomware or stealing data from your system via exfiltration, we need to be able to identify these actions as soon as possible. The sooner we can identify these actions, the sooner we can move into response in order to minimize the damage by rolling out ultimately our recovery plan and returning that back to that normal state. So what's important for us to remember is that we need both prevention and detection and response to give us the best chance at finding attackers. And this slide does a little bit better of a job to help us describe prevention versus the detection and response. So let's take a moment to look at the preventive measures we have in place and how detection and response adds that additional layer. So we've got our email security. It's designed to look for known bad actors within your inboxes, and I emphasize the known. which in turn causes the bad actors to create better phishing emails. This doesn't negate the need for email security per se, but there are still hundreds of spam or phishing emails that are blocked outright. Firewall filters out dangerous websites and is important to protect your office, but doesn't work now in this work from home environment that we're in today, in this bring your own device world where these devices are off that corporate network and they're more exposed. Antivirus is a critical step that filters out a lot of malicious activity based on the fingerprint of the file. By taking a fingerprint of every file on your machine, we can compare it against a database of known bad files and immediately stop or quarantine it. As hackers have advanced their trade, they have discovered ways to get around every layer of preventive security. That doesn't mean we don't need all of these layers. We're still all about the layered approach and this defense in depth, but each is important to building a full layered security approach. The final layer is that threat hunting, and it watches how the different applications or files are acting. Other layers might let a file that looks like a basic Microsoft application stay on a system, but having a security analyst look for suspicious activity means that we now have a way to find and remove the bad actors before they have a chance to do too much harm. In order to look for things that slip past your preventive defenses, the first thing you need is the ability to see it. A lot of tools in your network and security stacks have plenty of visibility that could potentially feed into an automation system to help filter out tons of noise, but you're still left with a considerable amount of information that needs analysis by trained threat operations. And this is where an MDR comes in. So here we've got the importance of threat ops. We need these folks, these industry experts who can analyze this suspicious behavior and inform us about this context-based types of stuff. And so that we can have the proper information in order to respond. Excuse me. For a lot of things, context is key. Apologies there. For example, quoting someone out of context can make or break the individual in the public domain. Or another example, what if you just see the words goodbye? What does it mean? Does it mean you're saying farewell to someone, or are you applauding them on their thrifty shopping skills? It's hard to tell without hearing more about the conversation, and language is just interesting like that. But take a look at this picture. We have a seemingly benign diving board. It's a beautiful day outside. Why not take a nice little dip? But what if we told you that diving board would have you diving into a tank full of sharks? Not so cool anymore, right? Like, I'll probably not get in that pool. Being able to zoom out, look at the bigger picture and see context, seeing context is extremely helpful in relation back to the threat ops. And in fact, it's critical for threat hunting. So onto more of monitoring the endpoint. Today you've got quite a bit of different things in the stack here. You've obviously got your existing firewall and content filtering at the network level for the network traffic. Your system files and user files are monitored by your antivirus. You may even have your user training and identity access management, MFA. The list kind of goes on. Where Huntress is fitting in here is around the more persistent foothold side, ransomware detection, and then the more stuff, which is kind of fun because it leaves it a little bit vague, but I will get into that in a little bit here because we do have some additional pieces there for us to talk about. So we keep using this word, footholds or persistence. If you're talking to Huntress, we talk about these things all the time. What is that? And what does it mean? When I joined Huntress, there were all these phrases I had heard, things like threats lurking in your environment, and then scare tactics like they're in there for weeks, months, even years. So this is where we started. And we our founders called this stuff out way back when we were founded. Things like successful cyber operations depend on these three things: initial access, communication, and persistence. And persistence being, that big one that we're focusing on here. So what is a foothold? In short, it's an auto run abused by a malicious actor in order to maintain persistence. We also call these persistence mechanisms. While attackers are constantly evolving and updating their tactics, we as defenders want a systematic framework to unpack all that goes into an attack. The attacker journey, or cybersecurity kill chain, as it's often called, is a way for us as defenders to codify or categorize how and where to mount our defenses. Perhaps the most popular or well-known is the cyber kill chain from Lockheed Martin. So let's go ahead and walk through that. The first step is to make your way into the environment. This is the break-in, or how an attacker makes their way into the environment. This is often through something like an RDP brute force attack, or more often than not, a phishing email. Once in, the idea is to survey the land. What potential system weaknesses can I, as the attacker, exploit? What are some easy targets or low-hanging fruit so I can maximize potential damage? After the survey, you want to put your stake in the ground. How can I implant myself in the environment so I'm very difficult to remove? How can I move laterally and gain more ground? As soon as I've landed in the environment, now I wait for instructions. Sometimes this could be days, weeks, months before I receive the instructions from command and control. But once I do, then what follows? It's go time. This is where ransomware hits. It's when potentially data exfil happens. This is the phase you'll ideally like to avoid at all costs if possible, obviously. While not all attacks take this exact path, much of the evolution we see are found within the individual phases. Even this kill chain itself has evolved over time based on how attackers are changing. I mentioned earlier, using the kill chain gives us, as defenders, a way to codify and systematically mount our defenses. Well, what do I mean by that? If we take just this first phase, let's look at the installation piece of this here. This is how the attacker implants themselves in the environment. Once they've slipped through preventive defenses earlier in the attack, they don't want to let go of all the work they've put in. This is where Huntress shines. This is also where most preventative security measures break down. Imagine crafting a phishing email, adding graphics to spoof a common vendor like Amazon or eBay, creating servers and infrastructure to build your malware. This all takes time and effort. But imagine losing all that effort to a simple machine reboot or when your victim logs off. It's unlikely they will open your phishing email again. Instead, you'll want to find a way to establish persistence on the machine so you can ride through some of those reset events. Here again, we see these standard Windows operating system tools and components that can be configured to automatically run. These are used as part of normal system operation. We use them all the time. As a user logs into their machine, there are startup items that automatically load, maybe your chat program or email or even your AV. Oftentimes, these items are ignored or even whitelisted by common endpoint security tools. Who would use a tool that blocks scheduled tasks from running or blocked all access to command or PowerShell? Preventive tools can't quarantine Windows. Windows would break and you'd uninstall the tool. This exploited auto run is what we at Huntress call a malicious foothold or persistence mechanism. Our team see hundreds of these footholds every day. The truth is, we need to find ways to accelerate security adoption. And this is not an easy solution. How can the multi-tiered approach of solving for attacker threats ever move faster? My personal opinion is that it's the responsibility of organizations like Huntress and other subject matter experts to make data readily available. This shortens steps 1 and 2 and 3. The next thing that falls on your shoulders is to be as proactive and preventative as possible, so IT can focus on supporting the daily needs of their clients. Finally, make evaluation, deployment, and management exceptionally easy. If those things are in place, then IT partners can get through their feedback loop substantially faster and get information to their clients faster. Next, we'll move to malicious actors taking advantage of various real-time events. Just like we recommend you increasing the tempo of your feedback loop, we are following that same advice. We will iterate faster by pushing solutions that will address the biggest pain points that are influenced by how threats are changing. Being aware of major shifts in IT, such as the movement to the cloud and SaaS, and most importantly, having a fantastic partner community that gives us feedback that we can quickly turn into action. And so this is just a little bit cleaner of a look at what I'm referring to here, capturing that information from our partners and all those stories, things like what Becky is doing here to talk to our partners on a continual basis to understand pain points and how we can do better as a partner. And then, identifying those biggest pain points that our customers do have, and putting that into building solutions that make sense for our community, for our target audience, and continuing to build iterations on what we've already done to make those pieces even better. Now let's jump forward a bit and look at action. In the majority of cases where we're seeing the most damage to end users is ransomware. Action could entail other things such as data exfiltration or even resource hijacking. But most of what we hear about is ransomware, and there doesn't appear to be an end to this type of malware. Ideally, we would not want the attack to reach this point, but given how attackers are weaving and pivoting their way through the other 4 phases, addressing this phase is all about early detection and faster response. If you can reduce your downtime by a day, 3 days, 5 days, what would you do to accomplish it? And this leads me to think about, even the most recent Verizon data breach report. It talks about once a bad actor has established persistence, that average hangaround time is still over 100 days. So we're talking a matter of months here. If we can shorten that time frame to minutes or hours or even days, it really gives us a better chance of stopping that ultimate payload threat that we have impending. So I've talked a lot about ransomware, different iterations of attack vectors, the process for solving for these, but I haven't really talked at all about the cybersecurity community and their response. Huntress knew that ransomware is and will continue to be a problem in the market. In most cases, we can see the larger attacks because they use a persistent foothold to launch their attacks. And that's kind of the core piece and the flagship of our product. There are a few examples where we ran into ransomware through a persistent foothold and were able to alert a partner about the incident early enough that they could push out the recovery even before their client ever realized there was an issue. That's the goal. In cybersecurity, we know that it's not always about preventing the attack. It's also about how quickly we can recover that's equally as important. And just like our IT partners in our Defender feedback loop, we started asking ourselves, how can I find out when ransomware hits sooner? How can I see which endpoints have been impacted? How can I prioritize and direct my response teams? But we also wanted to know, what about the ones that use fileless attacks, that don't use footholds? We were fairly blind to those, admittedly. What are other ways we could alert about ransomware as soon as it hit, especially if the attacks are evolving around current defenses? So we built our ransomware canaries. If you're not familiar with the canary in a coal mine story, basically, when coal miners were working, they would bring a canary into the mine shafts with them, and the canary was an early detection system for lack of oxygen. Canaries have smaller lungs, obviously, and could identify a problem before the miners could. So hopefully that early detection system would get the miners and the canary out of the mine safely. Very similar to that premise, we put hidden files in place that watch for ransomware. As soon as something changes our canary file, it trips an alert. What's notable is that the concept of ransomware canaries is not new or a novel technique as a way of alerting on possible ransomware. But we've looked at how ransomware is changing and what needs to be included to make it a fully robust and useful feature. First of all, these canaries are hidden to the end user, extremely lightweight as would be expected. And second, here's what's different in the way we've designed these canaries. These canary files have unique names for each user profile. They aren't named canary in the file name, so attackers don't know to bypass those files. By making them unique, we can create a QR code embedded as an image in the document that is completely unique to the end user profile. This way, if they are discovered somewhere on the dark web, there is a way to potentially trace back to that organization user and had their data that had their data exfiltrated. So previously in the past, that was one of the toughest pieces, was just finding that end user. And that unique identifier we have tied to this canary file with the agent really helps out in speeding that response time. This is important now because of the extortion threats. And finally, we're putting threat ops on top of canary alerts. Having our threat ops teams validate ransomware reduces false positives based on potential end user tampering or other corner cases that would otherwise create additional noise for you to weed out. Enabling the canaries is super easy. So if you're an existing partner and you haven't yet, you just log into your Huntress account, click on the ransomware canary icon on the left menu bar, just that little bird in the bird cage. A pop-up message up here is allowing you to enable this new service, and it pushes out these files to these different user profiles that you have for your hosts. If you are not a customer today, we can work on that and get you on into a trial and show you how to get these pushed out. Next up is external recon. RDP brute force attacks are still extremely prevalent based on machines with RDP services exposed on the internet. Not to harp on about COVID, but we all know that more people are working from home now. With the surge of people now working from home, the external attack surface has changed dramatically. Huntress ran an analysis of endpoint data on nearly 500,000 computers. Of those computers at the end of 2019, there were about 30,000 unique IPs. Huntress did the exact same analysis in March. We obviously added a few more partners, but most of it's more movement toward working from home. It ballooned 3x to just under 100,000 IPs. So the attack surface is getting wider, and it happened almost overnight. Something that attackers have been doing forever is searching for open ports. It was less of a problem when everyone was working behind a single firewall. But now, based on our data, again, you have 3 times the amount of attack surface to protect. In terms of Defender feedback loop, step 1 is learn. In this specific scenario, learning means that we're aware of certain external vulnerabilities in the environment. And knowing that we have those vulnerabilities helps us get to step 2, which is decide what our next steps are. With external recon, especially given the increased attack surface amidst more remote workers, we wanted to provide more visibility into whether my clients have services exposed, changes that impact the attack surface, identifying potential exposure for new clients. When it comes to our external attack surface, there are many tools out there that could be potentially offer reports, but our external recon is meant to provide ongoing updates to open ports and services that may require additional attention. It's to help guide decisions on how to handle any current exposure. In June, we released this feature called External Recon, which does, like I mentioned, scan for open ports, open SMB shares, or SQL Server databases from an external attacker point of view. It's another way that we can keep you safe by providing visibility into the gaps, aside from the other components that we offer in our platform. From an IT provider standpoint, this data is helpful, but in my opinion, what makes this so powerful is the additional decision points it can lead to. We give visibility into what is exposed so you can make better decisions, things like privilege access management, elevated permission levels, who has external access, are you using 2FA, et cetera. And for our existing partners out there, we just pushed out a new iteration of this solution, which is going to have these scans happening more quickly and also providing timestamps, but also then the services around them as well. So if it's something over port 3389, it'll let you know that that service is RDP, even though you may already know that, but it's going to be letting you know what types of services are exposed. So how does it work? You can deploy Huntress with your RMM. We have pre-built scripting for all the major RMMs out there. Our agent uses less than 1% of your CPU, about 20 megabytes of RAM. Super easy to deploy out using those RMM scripts that we have pre-built. As soon as that agent is deployed, we run a survey on your system. We're collecting meta level data on things like the hashes and binaries of all those auto runs on your system, and then sending that up to our cloud. Once that data is in our system, we classify your data based on trusted and reputable versus the things that we've never seen before or that look suspicious. For unknown and suspicious data, our threat ops team will open an investigation to determine if the data is safe or malicious. We provide you a detailed incident report directly to your PSA, which outlines the exact steps needed to fix it. We'll show you this in a minute as well. We only send a ticket for actionable items signed off by our threat ops team to avoid alert fatigue. So whenever you do receive an incident from us, there's simply action items to carry out. Our threat ops team has already handled the review, and this is something that can differentiate us from other solutions that are out there, and is a really core piece of what we're doing. So what really makes us different from other MDR services is that instead of us staffing those security engineers to do the remediation for you, which can get kind of messy, we use our researchers to put together that step-by-step instruction so that your help desk can keep knocking out tickets and you can keep the margins from the labor markup. And we did take it a step further as well by introducing something called assisted remediation. It's kind of like our easy button that you can just go ahead and click. Our partners all know about that, and that can help to just go ahead and take care of the incident right away. So here's a look at our dashboard, as you might expect to see, but really we didn't want to create another pane of glass for you to look at. We integrate pretty much all of the info you need directly into your PSA. We have 3 different areas, which are active incidents, resolved, and investigations. The active incidents, we send these when we find breaches in your systems. This is the only area of the dashboard you really need to focus on the regular to see if incidents are coming through. As soon as these incidents are fixed, we move them to the resolved incidents category automatically. And then we classify these incidents in 3 different ways, which is critical, high, and low. Criticals might be your trick bots or emotets. They're spreading around systems at a rapid pace. We say drop everything and get to this immediately as soon as you can. The highs, we recommend to clean these up quickly as it's an active infection that could be stealing data or logging keystrokes, probably located on one computer. It drops other types of malware, potentially, probably not spreading to other systems, but has the ability to do significant damage even still. And then your lows, these are, clean this up for good hygiene. These are like your malware remnants and artifacts from past cleanups. Maybe your AV got rid of the executable, but those footholds are still existing. And then pups, adware, we've seen these things sometimes turn into malware, so it's good to clean them up as well. And we'll be sending incidents around those. The resolved incidents, pretty self-explanatory. Either the agent runs a survey every 15 minutes and we see the footholds are gone. That means that either you've carried out the remediations that we've set forth or you've hit assisted remediation for us to carry them out for you. And pretty straightforward. After the next 15-minute check-in, that incident would move into the resolved state as we recognize that incident is gone. And then the investigations on the right there. These are the things that are brand new that our threat ops team is running, things that look suspicious and we've never seen before. We log the results of brand new investigations we do so you can see what we're looking at. Majority of investigations ultimately turn out to be clean. The malicious ones will move into the active incident report area. The ultimate goal here is to classify these as either known good or known bad and apply them back to our one-to-many approach ongoing. So I mentioned in the last slide that we'll push these incidents into your PSA. We understand that we're borderline worthless to you unless your techs can receive our alerts in the tools they already live in. Here's an example of a redacted ticket pushed to auto task. It shows you what client and device is infected, a clear description in layman terms of what's going on, recommendations on the severity based on the potential outcome of the immediate issue, what other security products are running on that endpoint, and simple remediation instructions written so that a junior level tech can carry them out. And this is an auto task ticket for a form of malware called Dridex, which is a banking Trojan. This type of malware has been on the rise and very common as of late, not just used for banks, and it can be used to distribute additional malware as a dropper as well, also known to have a final payload of ransomware. So you might be familiar with droppers. They sit dormant on your device, phone home to command and control servers only when they want to grab additional malware. Basically, they just chill until they get further information. In this example, this malware bypassed Sentinel-1, but things like this get past the full spectrum of AVs all the time. And that's not to disparage these AVs. They're amazing and very valuable tools. They're just not designed to look for this. While providing reports with the relevant remediation instructions is cool, we took it a step further, like I've mentioned, with the assisted remediation feature towards the end of last year. One of our customers recently got TrickBot when we first realized this feature. So this is a TrickBot ticket giving a description of the infection. As you can read here, the banking Trojan is capable of automatically propagating throughout a network and often used to install other malware. We show you what host it's located on and what security products have bypassed in the system. But now on each ticket, you'll have an assisted remediation button, as I mentioned. Once you click it, it will pop up a list of actions we can take. Sorry about that. It will pop up a list of actions we can take to help with the remediation, essentially, again, that easy button that we introduced. So fast forward to today, and we've now released ransomware canaries, external recon. We're continuing to improve upon assisted remediation and build out reporting and analytics and our partner enablement tools. And before too long, we'll also be providing a managed Windows Defender. So with that, where does Huntress fit? If you look at the NIST framework, we're covering the blind spot that most MSPs have between their preventative security and their backups. We focus on the detection and response. So this takes us to what we've spent a lot of our focus on lately. And so here's a bit of a teaser of this upcoming service. So you may be asking, why are we doing managed AV? Managed AV sits squarely within our mission of streamlining defense. One of the things you might hear a lot is in the community is pressure around the idea that we're not doing enough when it comes to security, that there are new gaps and new tools that need to be added. But there are tons of configuration knobs that will improve security and are completely free. But trying to manage it or deploy it is where things become tricky. The idea with managed AV is how can we get the most out of the tools you already have at your disposal? And so here's a quick look at some recent third-party testing here with managed AV. It's been doing really, really well on performance protection and usability, scoring perfect across the board here, and really is a new rising player here. And Windows Defender is included on millions of devices. It's tend to have been gone underlooked here, but it is, again, a strong up-and-coming AV. The only problem so far today is it's been difficult to manage. Again, there's no dashboard or reporting. You need some outside system Microsoft tool like SCCM or Intune to be able to manage this, but even still, it would be around single tenancy, and you wouldn't be able to manage it in a multi-tenant environment. So that's what Huntress is doing, is trying to bring the abilities to use this tool at your fingertips in a multi-tenant capacity that does make sense for MSPs and our partners. And finally, our updated partner enablement program. This service will be on the Huntress dashboard and will be divided into 3 sections. Master Huntress will include technical documentation, onboarding guides, and more to maximize your Huntress experience and grow. Grow revenue will contain ready to deliver slide decks and content you can use when selling security to customers and prospects. And then finally, gain knowledge will include security educational assets and information. And so this is, again, what Becky is working on and talking to our partners to make sure that this makes sense for our community of people and our partners so that when they're out there using this stuff, it's providing a lot of value for them. All right, well, that's it from me, Becky. Thanks, everyone, for letting me share. I'll go ahead and talk potential next steps following the panel discussion here, okay? Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Does anybody, if you have any questions, feel free again to throw them in chat or in the Q&A. He will definitely then at the end, we'll share some links on some more about the Defender piece and how to get signed up for some of the beta pieces of that and more information there, because that tends to be some of our biggest areas of question right now. So I am going to go ahead and have my panelists, if they would, turn on their cameras and their microphones. And I'll have Ryan and Annie mute so that we've got our panelists. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining today. I really, really appreciate you guys being on. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves to everybody. I always half jokingly say that I have my panelists introduce themselves and share how they ended up in this industry and in the roles that they currently have, because I just don't think that most young children grow up saying, I want to manage people's IT when I grow up. So I think it's always really interesting how people got to where they are in the space. So I'm going to go ahead and call on folks. I'm going to go just in the order that I can see you on my screen right now. So Corey, if you would share where you're located and a little bit about how you ended up as an MSP.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Mickey. Glad to be here. So my name is Corey Kirkendall. I President and CEO of 5K Technical Services in Plano, Texas. I think I was a bad boy in a former life and decided to become an MSP. So I think it's just karma coming back to get me now. It's been good. Always worked for big companies, always wanted to go out and help the little guys and started out kind of what we wanted to do to bring some of this top class IT down to them and put together a plan. And that's what we've been delivering on. So it's been great and we enjoy it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for, again, being here today and joining us over your soon to be lunch hour here. David, if I can get you to share a little bit about where you're located and how you ended up in this industry.
Thanks, Becky. My name is David Spire. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Intech. We've got 2 offices in Southwest Florida. So we have one up in Sarasota, Bradenton area and one in Fort Myers. I got in this industry, gosh, about 16 years ago, just because I wanted to follow the entrepreneurial journey, right? So I do not have a technical background, which is kind of interesting. And I've always just kind of run more of the sales and marketing side of our business. So I'm one of the principals here. And that's my story, right? I think it's really neat what we do every day. I'm never cease to be amazed, and the security and threat landscape has really changed the nature of our business over the last few years. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to some of your partners today.
Wonderful, thank you. Patrick, last but certainly not least.
Good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Patrick Kinsella, SVP and CTO, OnePath. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. Our offices are operating centers, which takes on a whole new meaning in today's COVID era, but operating centers, if you will, in Atlanta and Boston. How I got into this industry, Corey, I'm going to echo a little bit of what you said. It was probably under duress. The contract may not be enforceable in at least 40 of the 50 states, but in reality, I spent quite a few years as an SAP consultant. And once you reach that level of masochism, at that point, helping out some of the smaller businesses overcome some of their IT challenges. And really, it's viewing this role as one of educating them versus selling fear, uncertainty, and doubt, especially when you think about security, is just what excites me about this business.
Awesome. So thank you again for joining, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we've done a couple prep calls for this coming in. We've got a little bit of an outline, but for those of you in the audience, if you have a question or want to really kind of zoom in on one of the things we're discussing, we will absolutely take the conversation in whatever direction it kind of goes, and we'll feel that out as we go. But one question I get asked a lot from folks as I'm talking to them is, what should be in my security stack and how do I determine that? So question first then is, as you were building out your security stack or stacks that you're offering to your current and legacy folks, how did you start on that? Where did you start? How did you settle on it? How long did it take you to settle on a stack? Kind of what did that journey look like? And I will let whoever wants to jump in first go ahead and get us started with that one.
Corey looked like he was going to go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That great mute button got me. So
I'll go ahead and go. So for us, it started on a lot of conversations like this, right? It's trying to understand what other people in the industry were doing. We knew it was a conversation that we want, or a conversation we wanted to start having with our client partners and our
testing
prospects.
1, 2.
Um, and you know, Becky, we joked the other day, it started with a long list on our whiteboard in the conference room that stayed up there so long we had to replace the whiteboard because we literally couldn't erase it after we finally settled on something. So you know, for me, if we were going back to do it all over again, which we're kind of doing, we're launching the program, it's trying to identify first what you want to get accomplished, right? Because there's a lot of different tools and pieces out there. Do you work in specific verticals that you might need to look at certain compliances? I think that in this topic, it's so easy to have analysis paralysis. Like there's just so many different tools and weapons at our disposal, and it's probably a lot of like the Goldilocks principle, right? You don't want it too hot, you don't want it too cold, you want it just right. The one thing that I will say, and then I'll give the rest of the time back to the other guys, is understanding that you can make it too hot, but at the same time, you're taking on a lot of liability and a lot of responsibility. So what I'd warn against is diluting your offering down too much to meet a price compression point, maybe in your marketplace, and leaving too many gaps that you've now taken responsibility for. And as an MSP, a lot of your clients think you're doing it anyway. So at least start the conversation around change management of that expectation, if nothing else, right? So that's been our journey. Far too long, far too hard internally, far too much politicking. But you got to do something, right? You can't let that get in the way. So that's our story.
Perfect. I love that image of having to replace the whiteboard because it sat there for so long. I've walked into offices and seen those whiteboards where you can see the ghosts of what had to be very lengthy, painful conversations past still on their whiteboard. So Corey, if you can share, it looked like you were starting there for a second. Let's see if
no worries. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Awesome. Yeah. So for us, what we had to do is really evaluate what we already had in place and knew what it was working. And then we actually had to, ourselves align to a framework. We kind of have a hybrid. We have a NIST and a zero trust kind of a framework going on. And then that's what we wanted to implement across. So we made sure that whatever we had aligned into that. And then we started looking at the tools we had, how do they line into that framework? And then we started looking for partners to plug in at the places where we had those gaps to be able to go do that and to make sure that we were covered, making sure we were going. But we had to have kind of a framework and a plan to make sure that everything lined up with that and, and then figure out where that overlap was and kind of how we went forward.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you got to kind of identify key area there.
Yeah.
Patrick.
So coming into the role that I stepped into was it was an interesting time for us. It was about that point, David, that you mentioned, that inflection point of, all right, it's probably time to refresh this again. As I stepped into it from a different part of the business that wasn't really MSP focused, wasn't SMB focused, in hearing all the war stories of how client expectations were that we were already doing all the backups that weren't on their contract, how antivirus was included, whether or not it was in the agreement or not, and how all of that responsibility, there was an assumption that we were doing all that work for them. And looking at that from the standpoint of the total security package, how could we distill down some of the frameworks that are out there into we built almost a custom 5-layer framework of our own: protect people, shield information, inspect your infrastructure, secure your endpoints, and detect anomalous behaviors. And then we identified tools out in the marketplace really over the last 18 months that satisfy the needs of each of those 5 layers. And our approach has been to layer them into our overall full ITO bundle. So while we have the ability to sell them as point solutions, our approach is, if you're going to be a client of OnePath, you're going to buy one of, and I hate to say the good, better, best bundles, but if you're going to buy one of those 3 or 4 common solutions, it's going to be based on this security foundation. And we sell with that as a leading strength of those bundles.
So that leads then perfectly into the next piece here of knowing then that this has been a focus that took a lot of time compared to the rest of your overall managed services stack. How often are you making changes to your overall managed bundle stack, if you will? And then how are you future-proofing your margins? Do you include regular price increases in those contracts? How do you have those conversations?
Yeah, so I'll jump out there again on this one, Mandy. So for us, we're always having conversations because we're letting them know that things are changing and evolving all the time. Security is one that is taking off, and what we did yesterday is not what we're going to be doing tomorrow. It's just constantly changing. And so as that place where as long as we're educating our customer, we do price increases. We try to stay in communication with them as much as we possibly can on QBRs or TBRs to let them know that things are changing, things are going to do, and how we go through that. I think as long as it's not a shock and a surprise and you're really being that trusted advisor and with the customer, they're okay with that because they understand that the landscape and things are changing as well. And what we've come to a philosophy for those who don't feel that and that are not on that path, that's probably the time that they're probably either not going to be our customer anymore and we need to go look elsewhere. Because again, we pick up a lot of risk by allowing it just to go and just assuming it. And then that's what eats away the margins. Is like, hey, they're our customers, so we got to throw back up on it, even though they don't want to do it. We're going to do this. We try to protect ourselves, and it causes more problems on the back end. So we got to have those communication all the time.
No, that's QBRs, I think, are a key element there. And then, yeah, I think especially with some of the legacy folks, it can get easier and easier to just say, we need to do this because it's right for them, but they've been our customer for, the length of our business or this long amount of time. So knowing when to say enough is probably a pretty difficult angle as well.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah, for us, I'd say that we were relatively early adopters of the infrastructure managed service game. And frankly speaking, we were pretty lazy on adjusting our offering because we beat the market. So our challenge early on was education, like getting people up to speed on what managed services was and how it could help them in the SMB space. We started, mildly layering some new pieces into it. Going to your other question, Becky, what we've identified is that security is a new conversation, and when we looked at the stack of how we go to market with a managed security offering, and as Patrick pointed out, like we had to right size our infrastructure managed service offering as well. Like we couldn't make it all just a security play. We had to put some baseline product in there. And so, and what we knew is, what we believed that we know, we'll find out if we know it. What we believe is that it's going to be there's going to be a metamorphosis over time, right? The threats are going to continue to evolve, the tools are going to continue to evolve. And so we have to future-proof our agreements. And so there's two ways that we do it. Number one, we always try so we do 3-year contracts out of the gates on generally all of our services. And so we want to future-proof growth first. I don't want to have to go back and ask a client to upgrade if they hire 2 new people. So bake that into the agreement if you don't already. And the second thing is we just put auto escalations of 5% increase on an annual basis. And for years, we didn't do that. Like we didn't have the maturity. We were firm believers, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We'll increase our rate on new clients. And let's just not talk about that contract over there with the existing client. Can't do that anymore, right? I mean, again, the threat landscape looks different. We laugh at some of the agreements we have in place. We blow the dust off of them. It's time to renew them. Like what we're doing today, and to Patrick's point, what we do for them today is absolutely nothing like what we're doing contractually for them. And so we're smaller town markets. So a lot is done on a handshake, if you will. It's always a signed agreement, but you tend to get scope creep, and ultimately that's taken out of our gross margins, which makes it really challenging to grow your business at the right rate. So 5% increases, they auto escalate, but that gives us the revenue in a lot of cases to include these new tools without having to go back with our hat in our hand every time and saying, can we get another $4 an endpoint to do what's right for you? It allows us to help them make good decisions because they made that decision in advance of needing to negotiate annually.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Patrick, what about OnePath?
Well, I always enjoy hearing from both David and Corey a little bit of Paul Dipple in there. So future-proofing your agreements and that willingness, of course, IT maturity, and then the willingness to exit a client that doesn't necessarily buy in to the amount of risk that we're effectively underwriting as their provider. We're almost like an insurance company. Yeah, our approach was probably a little bit different in this sense, just because we were 4 different MSPs coming together with vastly different plans. So the reason for having to do this was we had, I think there's 160 different agreement types across those 4 MSPs, and we needed to consolidate. So this was very much about creating a formal product management organization to simplify and consolidate our product catalog. We're just wrapping up that initial effort. So in looking at how often we plan on changing it, the way we've written that plan is that we're going to do it annually. We're going to look for updates we need to make to those annually. We have not written annual price increases in. The idea is that we project a somewhere between 5 to 9% price increase every 36 months. So what we found is that baking anything in annually tends to result in, when we experimented with that early on, you end up having a discount year one so that they effectively end year 3 with the price you originally proposed. And that may just be a function of, that was primarily in Atlanta. Boston, believe it or not, was a little less competitive around price. Atlanta was hyper competitive around every dollar associated with that. It may just be the number of MSPs in this market that are selling unintelligently at the bottom of Paul Dippel's pyramid. But our approach has been, we need to look at that overall offering every year. And I love David's point of, you need to bake enough revenue in there to be able to include new offerings as they become relevant to your clients without having to go back to the wallet every time.
Absolutely. And that leads well then into some of the other questions that I'm hearing a lot around, what are the key elements or tools that you have in your standard security stack? And then how do you label them so that you do have that creative freedom, if you will, to kind of pull things in and out as needed without having to go back to your customers every single time and say, so that one tool that we said was great really wasn't doing this, so let's move it to that. So if you were going to review kind of your current stack, if you will, what are some of the key elements in your security stack that you are including in your current offerings? David, you had shared that on a previous webinar, and I know that there's the very lengthy version and then there's the more consolidated version. And it depends on, I guess, how technical of a resource internally you ask. But what tools are you including in your security stacks at this point?
Yes, truthfully speaking, I could probably not even tell you what 3/4 of that list does for us, except for keeps us secure. Are we going to get to what do we do, I guess, internally as well? I don't know if we're going to talk about that later, but I mean, as far as client facing, a lot of it depends on compliance, right? And so as a minimum, I can't think of a client that we serve that doesn't have PCI compliance. And so, I mean, everything from SOC SIM user awareness training is certainly a core component. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be on the call if we weren't big Huntress fans. Like we deploy that. Something I learned yesterday that we were doing that I'll just pause here for a second is we deploy Huntress even if they haven't gone on our plan that may or may not include that. We deploy it as part of our integration and onboarding for a new client, just to find risk that's out there, right? Because we take clients with pre-existing conditions, and we're stunned sometimes at what we inherit. To Patrick's point, we're underwriting a lot of problems out there, and so we'll put it in just to identify what we need to remediate that we might not even be able to know that we need to remediate because there's bad juju hanging around out there. So those are big components. We use policy management tools, without naming too many specifics, because really I don't think the tool matters so much. Internally, our security posture is significantly more robust even than what we do for client partners. And I think it's just because we're such a target as an industry. So, the full Office 365 ATP suite, we're using DLP, mobile application management. So as opposed to mobile device management, like learning new terms as we go, like that's a big one for us. And I'm going to stop talking before I get myself in trouble, because the smart guys, with the really technical guys are on this call, but that's just like everything's 2FA. And what I will say is that we just have to continue to embrace the fact that security is not convenient, but it's necessary. So whether it's remote access to applications and systems, or the way that we lock down our tools, like the risk is just too great for us to be cavalier about it for ourselves first, much less for our client partners.
Oh, that's that I know it's the old adage of eat your own dog food. On a panel we did recently together, I loved the other version that somebody shared of we drink our own champagne. Sounds a little bit more palatable there, of what you're doing internally then too. So Corey or Patrick, who wants
Yeah.
to
So,
go next?
and so for us, one of the things about us is that we are a client of ourselves, and we onboard ourselves. We leverage what we do, and we do those things. And part of that is to get the experience of what our customers are experiencing as well. Making sure we got proper documentation. We're working through it, and we spend a lot of time on training internally, whether we're doing tabletop exercises and doing training with our customers. Because no matter what we pick up and what we put together, all it takes is one click, right? And they're through it and they're where it wants to go. So we spend a lot of time, whether it's online training or in-person training, and really helping the customer understand what to do, to the point where not to get them overly paranoid, but to really think about before they click. If they don't know, delete or call somebody, right? Or if you do something, don't not say anything, right? That's the worst thing that you could do, right? And that's the piece we already talked about. What happens if I prevent it? But what happens if I accidentally do it and I'm embarrassed and I don't say anything? That's even worse, because now I got somebody hanging out, and I got somebody holding out in my network for a long time, and I haven't told anybody. And that's just a problem. So we just want to make sure we have it, right? The tools are there, we catch it, but we want to be able to be upfront. And then we have our standard stack of tools that we work and we go through it. And we call it, whether it's part of our bundle. And there's some things that, because you are a client of ours, you cannot go forward without. If you choose not to do that, then again, you're choosing not to be a client of us, because there's a lot of risk for us. And then I do internal to my guys, just like I tell my guys, I go back and say, hey, 2FA is a must. You cannot do it. It's a zero tolerance policy. If I walk back there and look at it and say, hey, show me your screen connect or show me something, and it's not 2FA on, I get you, got to go, right? There's just no tolerance for that. And so those are kind of things that we do. And it's just, fast, secure don't really go together, right? Cheap, secure don't really go together. Those words don't really kind of do it, because you're asking for a level and a level of thing that has to do it. So we want to make sure that we hold that bar, and we're putting in the right tools in place to go do that.
Yeah, Corey, I want to expand on one of the things you said about it takes one click of the mouse. There's a security awareness training partner of ours that shares a statistic with us that a best-in-class technology services firm will catch 95% of malicious emails in a 1-year period. So let's step back for a minute and assume you have AV in place, you have persistent threat detection, you have next-gen AV, you have Cisco Umbrella, whatever it may be. You have all these tools. You're using mobile device management. You're using MFA. You're using proper password complexity. You're managing your applications. You have strict policies around managing credentials that employees can see. If you have a 100-employee shop, 5 emails are still going to get clicked in that 1-year period. So that means you need to not only have that training, but it's also protecting the endpoints. And it's very much the way I always use the analogy of, it's like a home alarm system. It's not just about assuming that the alarm going off or having windows and glass break sensors is enough. It's how do you train every single person in your household to then recognize that a threat has just entered the perimeter, and what steps to take to protect what's most valuable to you, which is the lives of your family member, followed by any valuables in your home that are important to the continued sustenance of your family. And it's very much the same way in how we look at it. It's what can we do to protect it so that it doesn't get in, but then you have to assume that someone does get in, and what tools can be in place to then react quickly. And in many cases, that's a lot of policies and procedures around incident response, and having buy-in, not just from the IT director or IT supervisor or IT manager, but all the way up to the owner of a business, CEO, et cetera.
And to add something else here, I'd say that an important aspect, depending on where you sit in your product life cycle as it relates to security, you have to have somebody inside your business that's passionate about this. And you have to invest in, and Corey mentioned it, we've got to train our people. We got to train 100% of our people, but you need some, I believe you should have specialists also on your team. This is not the sort of thing that you can do on the job training and try and figure out as you go and watch a few webinars. And what Ryan shared was amazing, but it's not going to make me an IT specialist or a security specialist. And so having somebody that really leads the charge, our director of security yesterday, and the second thing I'll mention is having a roadmap, like what's your plan in moving forward. We had ours rolled out to us yesterday for the next 3 years, and just understanding that you need a definitive line item in your budget as an MSP as to what you're going to invest in security to protect your own house, not the cost of goods sold that we're selling outside. Frankly speaking, I mean, I was stunned at what we spend on internal security. I was like, wow, is it really that necessary? Right. And that was a question I asked. And so it's really expensive, like to do it right, to both of these guys' point. But when you think about the fact that we spent the last 23 years building this business and it literally can be gone in one click, it's not too expensive. Like it's too expensive to not do that. Remember, no decision's a decision. And so specialist, somebody passionate that leads the charge, that you hand over that piece of the business to, I feel is an important aspect of your security posture as a managed service provider, which then allows you to go out and take that into your community to protect the community. It can't be backwards in. It's got to be, I think it's got to be an inside out approach.
That's awesome.
No, those are great points. Patrick, I just have this image of there's an incident. What do we do now? Like that incident response plan is so critical to everything that if the alarm's going off, but nobody knows what that alarm means, you're really selling your entire security stance short. I talked to another MSP. I thought this was brilliant. They have their Bible of security, and every so often she just walks out in the office space when they were all together, would just yell out a scenario and say, how do you respond? And so basically running security fire drills with her team so that they knew, like a well-oiled machine, what to do next. And she said it got to a point that it became kind of fun for people because it was just a random occurrence, but just how important that became as part of their own internal security posture. So we've talked a lot about now, what you're doing internally, what that looks like, and how you got to that point. Okay, so you've developed your stack. Now it's time to sell the stack. So the MSPs I talk to, you're gaining new business with your security stack or your security offering and your overall offering. Those legacy folks, getting them to sign on for it tends to be the most difficult part. So as you were moving into this new security stack, do you have everybody current on it? And how long did that take to get folks bought in to an upgraded, if you will, security look?
I'm waiting for these guys to tell me how they did it because we haven't been able to successfully get everybody over.
So what we had to do, man, is if you go back to the, everybody has to be on it because the risk is big. So I had to sit down with my team, I had to sit down with everybody and say, guys, we're going to go and have this conversation and we're going to create our own churn because churn is going to happen, right? And this is what we're going to do. And so what we did is we put them on a strict plan that by a certain time and a certain date we needed to be here, and this is where we were going. And then we just had to follow that piece to get there, because by not having it all in place, I just couldn't sleep at night. It was just tough for me, and that's not in a place that I want to do and I want to be. Especially now with this whole COVID and work remote from home and things from that perspective, it has created a new opportunity now, is that those who have compliance regulations and have things from that perspective, that security now extends all the way to where that remote worker is that they didn't even think about before, right? So it's an opportunity for us to go out and have these conversations that this is necessary, 100% necessary to go and do this and make it happen, which is going to strengthen your overall posture. And cybersecurity is all about the risk that you're willing to accept. And some of them say, hey, I got a cybersecurity policy, that's what it is. But that's not good enough for us, right? We got to say, you got to put some effort into, because just saying, I don't know, I didn't understand, is just not an acceptable answer anymore, because it's in the news every day. We're telling them about it constantly. And I don't believe, and I know there's those things out there saying, hey, here's a piece of paper, I told you about it. It's not going to do that process. That's great. But in the day, it's still going to come back to us as an MSP, and here's what it's going to be, and what do we not do to do that? And I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so moving them to it, we got almost all of our guys over. They're on the plan to get done, and those who won't sign up and get it done between now and the end of the year probably won't be our clients. It's a hard stance. It's a tough business, but what we're seeing is they're more accepting that we're having the conversation, because if we're not having it, somebody else is having it for us. No doubt.
Corey, you're definitely ahead of us. We're probably about a year behind that from a traction standpoint. We've got about a third of our revenue today coming from clients that are on this new fully baked out bundle. We're looking to, it was effectively about a 2.5-year plan. So we want to be about there by the end of next year. It's as far as what we've had success with. I mean, new logos, it's surprisingly easy to go out into the marketplace and sell that comprehensive bundle. Win rates are higher than they were when we had a lower cost, less inclusive product. I don't know if it's just the function of how we're selling during COVID. It's the same sales team, it's the same marketing message, just with a different product offering. But for converting that legacy, I mean, Becky, that's such an interesting point, that they're the hardest ones to swing over. What we found has been successful for us is once you have enough of a critical mass, you can start to gather data on what their peers in their industry are doing from within your client base. It's, well, all the other physicians that, or at least you could say 60% of the physicians that we work with are already doing this. I don't want to sell fear, uncertainty, and doubt to you, because that's just not the right way to partner. But I should tell you that you are behind your peers. And to a business owner, to a practice manager, that tends to be something that they latch on to. It's always about trying to at least keep up with their peers. And based on how they're judged or what hospital system they may be a part of, for that example, they may want to be ahead of their peers. So just providing them a data point on which to latch. And it's almost like setting the mean and telling them where they are on the curve.
Yeah, I agree with Patrick 100%. What we're seeing in our market, it's far easier to get net new engagement on the stack than legacy engagement. We too are working a plan, right? So we've identified the clients, we're working our way through them to have those discussions on, you know, migrating them over, and we're putting more tools, as I mentioned, more tools into our existing stack to continue to add more layers of security in there. And so it's a mixed bag, same way. You know, sometimes it's hard to get your clients to sit down and talk to you, especially if they feel like they're going to ask them for more. But education's a big piece of it as well. I think there's a fine line. Well, maybe not a fine line, but the fear, uncertainty, and doubt is real. It's out there today, but we've worked our way through the early adopters, and now what we're trying to do is catch them before they're the horror stories, right, where they call us up and it's too late. And so a lot of our marketing and events are tied around trying to educate people on, you know, a different way and what's going on out there in the marketplace.
Becky, can I ask one? David, I've got one question on that actually that I've heard on a couple of other panels, and I've always liked to get different perspectives on this. Maybe one I'd like to ask for both your perspectives. How have you been able to attract clients or prospects into those marketing events in a virtual world? It was a lot easier when we said, we're going to bring in bagels, we're going to bring in breakfast, we'll host you at a nice business club in Midtown and bring people in and share that content. Now it seems like Zoom fatigue is set in, and getting a true participatory audience has been a real challenge for those educational content webinars.
For us, it's super hard right now. So we've gone, so we were doing on average, we're very, very blessed and fortunate that we've got an awesome marketing team that's engaged and they understand it. And we run good events, but we tried to not do them too frequently. So we were doing maybe once every 6 weeks, we were doing live streams or webinars pre-COVID. We doubled down and we were doing them every other week for a long period of time. And we had great attendance early on. And then all of a sudden, like the bottom fell out of it, just like you're saying, Patrick. And so where we've kind of shifted our focus is we've made them much more specific to the client. So we'll say, let us do a staff training for you on user awareness or what's going on in the marketplace. And so instead of going to a broad, give me 2 contacts per company, now it's give me 1 company and put me in front of all your people. I will tell you the engagement in those are terrible though, right? It's usually those are the ones that are hardest to get the cameras turned on. You don't feel like they're paying attention and it's not as good, but you're doing something, right? You're getting the message out there in some way. And in a lot of cases, I mean, just to be very self-serving for a second, really what I'm most worried about is the perception of partnership that we're getting out there. And if I can just reach 2 or 3 other people, like we're better off than we were not getting any of them. And, you know, it's a great question setup. We're using them is a bit of a way into a network to even run test phishing campaigns to start to show them their own data. Like to your point, nobody wants to be left out of the group, but it's a little hard to argue with your own results of what's going inside your client base or inside your user base as it relates to the clicks and what's coming through. So that's how we're doing it right now.
Yeah. Very similar on our side as well. We went from trying to get a RAS to really focusing on our customers and on those, you know, when we get an opportunity, we may participate in a webinar maybe once every quarter or so from that perspective. Because right now, I mean, I'm tired of webinars. I think everybody's tired of webinars and just trying to get everybody together. Right now, I find myself more busy doing webinars and meetings like this than I did when I could go meet personally face to face. We've stuffed it in.
Not that this one's not awesome, Becky. Thank you.
It is very awesome.
If we did all the prep calls to get ready for it and all of that. Yeah, there's days where you end it and I'm like, I think I've spoke more words now than I ever did on an exhibit hall floor at any show I ever went to. Patrick, then same question back to you. Are you guys seeing any success in some of your virtual events to recruit new clients?
I would say we're having more success with virtual events in convincing the legacy embedded base to embrace new technology. Getting early on, we had a lot of interested potential prospects listening and learning. But to your, David, you made the point earlier that participation dropped off around early June and has never really come back. We do a lot better with vertical specific content. And we're just about to kick off a series on how to be more productive with teams. You're buying it. Do you know you have it? How good are you at using it? It's a confusing interface, but it's a great tool. So we're converting it over to just training you on what you already have. And there's some value in that. It's really just about getting their mind share. It's being that spirit of partnership and providing value. I mean, like to that point of how do you get over webinar fatigue? Provide them something that they need, even if they don't know they need it.
No, that's a solid point. I like that perspective of kind of teaching them to use the tools that they're already paying you for, just because it's good knowledge, and then you're getting some buy-in on things and some value in areas that they might not have thought of. David, I didn't want to miss the opportunity though for you to go a little bit more in depth on what I think is an incredibly creative, the Trojan horse that you're doing with some of the security pieces that you go in and do some of the training and the phishing campaigns. If you'd share a little bit more about.
Sure. It's in the same spirit of we were just talking about. It's so we do it both for net new prospects, but more for our client partners, because we've got a lot of awareness as to what's already going on inside their business and inside their organization. And so we'll use the end user training, and again, they were far more effective and engaging when I was standing in the same airspace with somebody or one of our teammates were, but we use those as an opportunity to train their people. And it's incredibly easy for them to get to agree to that, especially Patrick, as you said, you're bringing in the bagels and the breakfast and some Chick-fil-A or whatever it might be. But we do it with an understanding that we get permission on two things. Number one, we want to run a phishing campaign on them in advance, but we don't tell their end users that. And number two, we want 15 minutes at the end of it with the stakeholders to just share the results, right? And so we use that education as a way to get in the door. And really what we were doing at first with clients when we tried to approach them is we'd sit down before we took this approach. Is security important to you? Yes, it's important to you. Would you like to learn more about how to secure environment? Absolutely. We bring a proposal and they say it's important, but it's not that important, right? And so it was a price discussion, and there was just sticker shock around it, and like we just didn't handle it intelligently. And so it only took us a few of those to say, okay, this isn't working. Let's try a different path. And so that's when we went to the education based, very specific to the organization. And really our goal with that first one is just to get them to buy into the concept around doing a NIST assessment. We use the ConnectWise Identify tool for that. And it just takes it to a different layer, right? And so we continue the engagement and education process through 3 or 4 steps. Certainly takes us more manpower to do it, far more beneficial from a partnership perspective. Like they tracked it, and we've seen a lot higher engagement on our ability to win existing clients into those net new relationships when we take that tiered approach, because now they're not arguing with, I don't have a problem. And I mentioned this the other day. We've got a gentleman we work with, and he likes to say, you can't push a rope, right? You walk into a prospect, say like, I've been safe for 20 years, sell me on why I need security. Like, good luck on that conversation, right? And it's just like, you don't today, call me, call me when you do, right? It's one of those things. It's like, maybe it may not be today, may not be tomorrow, but may not be ever. But are you willing to take that risk? And so for our existing partners, we found a far better track using that education space to be able to get in and truly demonstrate where their risk lies, and it's changed the whole narrative in a relationship with them as it relates to how to mitigate that risk, which is really all we're trying to help them do.
Perfect. No, thank you for sharing that story. I think that I like that you can't push a rope mentality. That yeah, and that FUD version of selling of it's gonna happen to you is just noise at this point. Like that's just not a way anymore to talk about security. And so I like that kind of what's your risk? What are you willing to tolerate type conversation a little bit more. So that brings us to the end of our outline for the day. The chat has been quiet, so I'm hopeful that means that people have ordered those lunches and are eating. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate your time. It was a lot of fun getting to prep for this and kind of talking through some of the conversations that you're having. Continuing to have these types of conversations is increasingly important so that we can continue to grow as a community. You know, I've heard it said multiple times, but I think it's very true that, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. And that's such a critical element here, that we can all be better about our security and having these conversations with customers and learning from each other. So thank you again so much for your time today. Ryan, I'm going to hand it back to you. I know you did have some follow-up points for everybody in the audience, but yeah, appreciate your time, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks guys, really appreciate it. David, Patrick, and Corey, really appreciate you joining in today. I had a little bit of a takeaway here, so there were some cool quotes in the mix there. David Spire, security is not convenient, but it is necessary. I love that, very true. Patrick coming in with, we're not selling on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but we are letting them know if they're behind their peers. I like that. And then Corey coming in, no MFA, you're gone. Zero tolerance policy on MFA. I love this stuff. Great stuff, guys. I'll go ahead and share here. I just have a couple things to wrap up with as far as next steps with everybody before we get dropped off. And so, you know, if you guys are a prospect or somebody who's just doing a little discovery on Huntress, we would love for you to test out and just kind of do a little bit of a free security audit on persistence in your environment with your host there. We do offer a free 21-day trial or the first 3 critical or high incidents that take place. We recommend unlimited hosts, push it out across the board to do that test. We'll provide the most value if we're on the most hosts there. So there's our trial link. Reach out to me or just jump on our website. If you are a current partner, enable those ransomware canaries, check out the external recon and those recent updates that have taken place. Get on our managed AV list there and start learning more about that. We're excited about that push out as well. So thank you all so much for joining in. We'll hang around for a little bit longer. So please feel free to drop any questions you have here towards the end if they come up. But thanks again, all. We really appreciate it.
So I thought one of the really interesting points that one of them brought up was using it then to even scan incoming customers.
Yeah.
So that you know coming in that you're not inheriting anyone else's.
Yeah, pre-existing conditions, right?
Direct pre-existing conditions. Yeah. And what a unique way to do that, and that you know, not only then for a trial deployment of deploying it multiple places, but then, you know, once you engage with us, learning how to use it even to scan ahead of time. So yeah, you're not letting anything in, because wow, MSPs, you guys are amazing. You carry so much risk with you in your businesses every day, and you do it so well. Mm-hmm. So you know, just making sure that you're protecting your own house becomes just increasingly important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like yes, we will absolutely send out a copy of this recording to everyone who registered. So we'll get that recording out. If you have not received that email from Grubhub, please let us know, marketing@huntress.com, and we'll make sure to get that updated or changed for you. And then it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So oh, perfect. Yeah. Thank you again, though, everyone who joined us. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and going off of that, you know, inheriting those pre-existing conditions, we definitely get a lot of customers when I'm working with them as well, where they get, maybe they'll get a hit really hard and there's a bunch of high incidents or criticals, and they're like, oh man, that's that new customer. Those must be some of those what we're calling pre-existing conditions here. So it also helps out if you are running that. It is that audit of the persistence and footholds, and that can give you the necessary ammunition you need to maybe close that customer or maybe close them into the security side of the house as well. So yeah, super cool. Great conversations. All right.
Well, great. Where did the name Huntress come from? That is a great question, Troy. I'm gonna try not to kill this, but I believe that it came from Diana, the goddess of the hunt. And I think that is actually the name of our logo. I think that she was designed off of Diana. If I'm wrong, let me know. But yeah, it's from that Greek mythology there. So
Super cool. Good
that
question.
is a great question, and I was not expecting that. I do a lot of prep for these, and that was one that caught me off. So way to go. Awesome. So all right, well, we'll give you guys back just a few minutes in your day then, and I'll go ahead and I have the power to end the meeting as well. So thank you again for your time today, and we will see you again. Have a good day.